Well, good morning. It's Saturday, May 15th, and we're gathered for this morning's devotion, again coming from Hebrews for Everyone by N.T. Wright. And today's devotion is from chapter 3, verses 14 through 19. We share the life of the Messiah, you see, only if we keep a firm, tight grip on our original confidence right through the end. That's what it means to say, today, if you hear his voice, don't make your heart hard, as in the great bitterness. Who was it, after all, who heard and then became bitter? It was all those who went out of Egypt under Moses, wasn't it? And who was it that God was angry with for 40 years? It was those who sinned, wasn't it? Those whose body fell in the desert. And to whom did God swear that they would never enter this rest? Wasn't it the people who didn't believe? So we can see that it's their unbelief that prevented them from entering. Nobody wants to fall asleep while driving a car, but a remarkable number of people do it. In the UK, at least, there are now signs on the major roads that warn motorists of the danger of sleeping driving. Tiredness can kill, they say. You'd think it would be obvious. Fancy hurling down the road at 70 miles an hour while being sound asleep. The newspapers have recently reported that courts are going to impose much more severe penalties for people who have gone to sleep at the wheel and caused serious or fatal accidents. But I know how it happens. 2 or 3 times in my life I have found myself, of necessity, driving late at night after a long, tiring day. Even if you stop regularly and drink a lot of coffee, there comes a point when the whole body is sending signals to the brain, to the imagination, to the will, whispering louder and louder that it wouldn't matter if you just shut your eyes for a moment. It would only be for a minute or two. After all, the car's going along quite merrily just now. Surely it can do without you for just a couple of seconds. And of course, if you give in that moment, you're in real danger. And so if everybody else anywhere near you on the road, but the point I'm making is that when nobody gets into the car with the aim of falling asleep halfway to their destination, the physical effects of tiredness include the deceitful whisper that tell you it's all right, really, nothing bad will happen. You might as well nod off for a minute. And when those whispers happen, all of the things you need is clear thinking. You need to recognize the state you're in and take a quick and decisive action. Recognizing the state you're in spiritually and morally is something few Christian teachers have had anything to say about in recent years, at least in the part of the church where I work. We have heard so much about following your own spiritual path and continuing your own journey of faith that we can easily get the impression that we should merely do whatever feels best at the time and hope that it all works out somehow. Well, it may, but it may not. There are times in Christian living which corresponds to those moments of sudden sleeplessness in a car. Times when, for whatever reason, there is a persuasive whisper in your ear telling you that you might as well take a break now. That it doesn't really matter if you give in to temptation, but you don't need to make an effort in prayer or reading the Bible or making thought and care of your neighbors or working for God's justice in the world. It seems so much effort. It would be much easier to slack off for a bit. When you find yourself thinking like that, you need to do a mental and spiritual equivalent of stopping the car, getting out, having a cup of coffee, and doing some brisk physical exercise, or even some proper rest. And the point of the passage continues in the exposition of Psalm 45, is that we need the spiritual discipline all the way through our lives to the very end. As verse 14 insists, we need to keep firm, a tight grasp on our original confidence. If we aren't quite as wide awake as we were when we set off, we need to take steps to get ourselves back into the condition. Otherwise, in spiritual language, our hearts become hardened and bitter, the spiritual equivalent of nodding off while driving. Hebrews rams the point home with 3 questions of verse 16, 17, 18. Who was it who heard and became bitter. It wasn't people who lived in the wilderness anyway, who knew nothing except a hard and difficult life and could be expected to be grumpy about it. It was the children of Israel who had come out of Egypt under Moses' leadership and seen everything God had done at the Red Sea, not to mention a powerful sign of judgment on Egypt before they had left. Don't think, in other words, that just because you had the best intentions when you got in the car, you won't feel sleepy some way down the road. Don't think it can't happen to you. It can. If you don't watch out, it will. And who was it that God was angry with? It wasn't a different people, Gentiles, pagans, people outside the family of God had chosen and called out of Egypt, a different people who weren't descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. No, it was his own people who had gone against his word, who heard what he said and did the opposite. Again, the writer is insisting this warning isn't for the person standing next to you, it's for you. Yes, you. And finally, what matters is continuing to believe. Many of the people in the wilderness simply stopped believing that God was really with them, really leading them. Again and again, they accused Moses of simply tricking them so that he could lead them where he wanted. When they came close to the promised land, early on in their wandering, the spies who went to look over the land told the people what a dangerous and difficult place it was. So they stopped believing in God's promise, instead believed a lie. That's the ever-present danger which Christians faced in the first century and which we face today as well. Once you stop believing either in God who called you, rescued you, and guided you, or in the future he has promised for you, you may simply go around and around in the wilderness and never get anywhere. And to go back to the sleeper driving once more, once you give to the impulse, you will not only put yourself at risk, all the other people whose lives you touch will be in danger as well. And so, really simple point he's getting here is, who was God mad at? Who was God mad at? Well, he was mad at his own people for not believing. And so for the writer of Hebrews, that's an important point, is that we need to continue to believe. In the hard times when we're tested, we need to be the ones who believe. We need to be the ones to believe in all the signs and wonders that God has done in this world. We need to see it clearly and not fall asleep at the wheel and not recognize God's work. That's all he's saying is don't wander off. Stay close to God. Stay close to the teachings of God. Stay close to your understanding of God. Stay close to the Word of God. And don't wander off, because wandering off can be a dangerous thing.